The first thing the villagers heard was not a roar. It was weeping, not human weeping, deeper, heavier, shaking the air itself as if the sky were grieving. Windows rattled in their frames. Livestock panicked in their pens. Children were pulled indoors as doors slammed shut across the mountain settlement. Ethan Ward stepped out onto the clinic porch before anyone could stop him. The sound was coming from the eastern ridge, and it was getting closer. A massive shadow crested the treeline. Gasps rippled through the village square as a full-grown mother dragon descended into view. Her wings ragged at the edges, scales smeared with ash and blood. She did not land with dominance. She collapsed. The ground shuddered beneath her weight. Clutched carefully between her forelegs was something small, something limp. A cub. No one moved. No one breathed. Dragons did not come to humans for help. They did not lower themselves before settlements. They did not cry, but this one did. Her enormous head lowered slowly until it rested near the dirt road leading directly to Ethan's clinic. Her chest heaved with broken, desperate sounds. Her cub lay motionless in her grasp. Smoke curled faintly from the little one's nostrils, but the breaths were shallow. One wing bent at an unnatural angle. Dark venom streaks marked the scales along its neck, thin black veins spreading outward like cracks in glass. Ethan felt the cold weight of realization settle into his chest. Wyvern toxin. Rare. Fast. Fatal. Behind him, villagers whispered frantically. Don't go near it. It could be a trap. She'll burn the whole town. But Ethan had already stepped forward. Slowly. Open palms visible. The mother dragon's head lifted slightly. One massive golden eye fixed on him. There was no fury in it. Only terror. He stopped just outside the reach of her claws. I can try, he said quietly. His voice sounded very small against her size. The dragon's nostrils flared. Heat washed over him. Not a threat, just breath trembling with grief. He took another step. The cub's body twitched weakly. That decided him. Ethan moved carefully to the dragon's side and knelt beside the cub. Up close, the damage was worse. The venom had already reached the bloodstream. The dark veins pulsed faintly beneath delicate scales. The wing fracture had likely occurred during escape. The mother dragon let out another low, broken sound. Ethan swallowed. I need space, he said gently. If you want me to save him. The dragon hesitated. Then slowly, she pulled back just enough. The entire village watched in stunned silence. Ethan carried the cub toward the clinic. The mother dragon followed, but stopped at the edge of the square, lowering herself once more like a sentinel carved from sorrow. Inside the clinic, Ethan worked quickly. He had treated burns, claw wounds, and minor dragon illnesses before. But venom of this potency required something more than conventional medicine. He opened the locked cabinet beneath his surgical table. Inside lay a small vial, iridescent, faintly glowing. Dragonfire extract. Illegal without council approval. Highly unstable. But it neutralized toxins by forcing rapid cellular regeneration. He looked down at the cub. Breathing weaker now. Heart rate slowing. If he miscalculated the dosage, the extract would overload the cub's system and burn him alive from within. Ethan exhaled slowly, then began. He sterilized the wound area, carefully cutting away damaged scales around the venom entry point. The cub whimpered faintly. First sound since arrival. Good, Ethan murmured. Stay with me. Outside, the mother dragon pressed closer to the clinic walls, sensing every shift. Ethan injected a measured amount of the extract directly into the bloodstream near the toxin spread. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the cub convulsed violently. Flames burst from his mouth in uncontrolled spurts. The clinic walls blackened. Ethan held him firmly but gently, shielding the fragile body from striking against metal instruments. It's fighting, he muttered. Let it fight. The dark veins pulsed brighter, then began to recede. Scale coloration slowly returned from ashen gray to deep emerald. The cub's wing trembled, fracture visible. Ethan moved quickly to stabilize it, applying a reinforced splint designed for avian anatomy but adjusted for draconic joint structure. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the cub inhaled sharply, deep, strong. His eyes fluttered open, brilliant gold, alive. Outside, the mother dragon froze. She felt it, the shift, the return. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaustion washing over him. "You're not done yet," he told the cub softly. "But you're staying." The clinic door creaked open slowly. A massive eye peered inside. Ethan stepped aside. The mother dragon lowered her head into the clinic, careful not to damage the structure despite her size. Her gaze locked onto her cub. The little dragon lifted his head weakly, made a soft chirping sound. The mother dragon released a sound unlike anything the villagers had ever heard. Relief, overwhelming. She lowered her snout gently beside the surgical table. Ethan stepped back, giving space. The cub nudged his mother's scales with clumsy affection. The venom was gone. The fracture stabilized. He would heal. Outside, villagers emerged cautiously from hiding. No flames came. No destruction followed. Instead, they witnessed something impossible. The massive dragon turned her gaze toward Ethan. Slowly, deliberately. She lowered her head until her brow nearly touched the clinic floor before him. A gesture no dragon had ever made in that village. Acknowledgement. Gratitude. Ethan swallowed hard. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly. But the mother dragon did not rise immediately. Because what he had done next, risking his license, his life, and possibly the fragile treaty between species, was not simply medicine. He had chosen compassion over fear, and the entire mountain had seen it. The cub let out another small chirp, stronger this time. The mother dragon lifted her head slightly, and outside word began to spread, not of a dragon threatening a village, but of a human who had saved one. And in the distance, beyond the ridgelines, others were already listening. By nightfall, the entire mountain region knew, not because the villagers spread rumors, but because dragons did. High above the settlement, silhouettes circled in widening spirals, massive forms cutting across the twilight sky. They did not descend. They did not roar. They watched. Inside the clinic, Ethan barely noticed. He hadn't slept. The cub lay on reinforced bedding near the back wall, wings secured in a carefully angled splint. The dragonfire extract had burned away the venom, but it had also accelerated the cub's metabolism dangerously. His temperature fluctuated in sharp waves. Ethan adjusted cooling compresses across emerald scales, monitoring breathing patterns and pupil dilation. "You're stable," he murmured quietly, "but you're not out of the woods." The mother dragon remained outside the clinic doors, refusing to leave. Her massive body curled protectively around the building, wings forming a living barricade. She had not eaten. She had not slept. She had not moved except when the cub stirred. At dawn, a shadow darker than the rest descended from the clouds. Not circling, landing. The impact shook rooftops. Villagers gathered again at a cautious distance. The newcomer was enormous, older than the mother, scales a deep iron gray streaked with age. Scars lined his neck like carved lightning. His horns were thicker, ridged with ancient authority. Patriarch. The mother dragon lifted her head slowly as he approached. Their gazes locked. He did not roar. He did not accuse. He lowered his head slightly toward her, then toward the clinic. Inside, Ethan felt the shift in pressure. He stepped outside. The iron-gray dragon's eyes settled on him instantly. Cold. Assessing. Ethan stood his ground. "If you're here to take him," Ethan said evenly, "he can't travel yet." A ripple of heat passed through the iron-gray dragon's nostrils. The mother dragon let out a low, warning rumble. The patriarch ignored it. Instead, he spoke. Not in human language, but Ethan understood. The bond between healer and patient had sharpened something inside him. An intuition beyond sound. "You used forbidden flame." Ethan didn't deny it. "Yes." "You risked burning his core." "Yes." The dragon's eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" Ethan glanced back through the clinic window where the cub shifted weakly. "Because doing nothing would have killed him." Silence fell across the square. The iron-gray dragon studied him longer. Then something unexpected happened. He stepped closer, not threateningly but deliberately, and extended one massive claw toward the clinic doorway. The mother dragon stiffened. Ethan didn't move. The patriarch's claw gently touched the stone frame where faint scorch marks remained from the cub's convulsions. He inhaled deeply, assessing the residue, the control, the dosage precision. When he pulled back, his expression had changed. Not softer, but no longer cold. You calculated risk against certainty of death, the dragon's presence conveyed. Yes, you chose burden over safety. Ethan nodded once. The patriarch turned his massive head toward the watching dragons still circling above. A single sharp roar tore from his throat. Not aggression, declaration. The circling shapes shifted formation immediately, widening their perimeter instead of descending. Protection. The villagers gasped. Ethan blinked. You're guarding the town? The iron-gray dragon looked down at him. We guard what guards our own. The words struck deeper than Ethan expected. Behind him, the clinic door creaked. The cub stumbled into view. Still weak, still splinted, but standing. The mother dragon surged forward instantly, lowering her massive body to support him. The cub chirped softly and leaned into her scales. The entire square fell silent. The patriarch stepped closer and lowered his enormous head until he was eye level with the small dragon. The cub lifted his chin bravely. The patriarch's nostrils flared once. Then he did something no villager had ever seen. He bowed his head not to the cub, to Ethan. A slow, deliberate incline. Acknowledgement from one of the oldest dragons in the mountain range. The villagers stared in disbelief. Ethan swallowed hard. You don't have to. But the patriarch had already turned his gaze skyward. Another roar followed, different this time. A summoning. Within minutes, more dragons descended, not to intimidate, but to gather. They formed a wide semicircle around the clinic and village square, wings folding respectfully against their backs. The mother dragon remained beside her cub. The patriarch addressed the gathered dragons in low, resonant tones that vibrated through stone and bone alike. Ethan couldn't translate every nuance, but he understood enough. He had not merely saved a life. He had altered perception. Dragons had long believed humans too fragile, too fearful, too divided to be entrusted with their young. Yet one human had defied fear, law, and consequence to preserve a dragon's future. When the patriarch finished, he turned back to Ethan one final time. You carry no flame in your blood, the ancient presence conveyed. Ethan shook his head. Just stubbornness. For the first time, the iron-gray dragon's eyes gleamed with something close to amusement. Stubbornness is a form of fire. The mother dragon gently nudged her cub forward. He limped carefully toward Ethan, tiny claws tapping softly against stone. Ethan knelt instinctively. The cub reached up and pressed his forehead against Ethan's chest. Warmth spread through him, not transformation, not power, just connection. The patriarch observed closely. You will be remembered, he said. Ethan exhaled slowly. I didn't do it to be remembered. That is why you will be. As the sun rose fully over the mountain peaks, dragons lifted into the sky one by one, but not before circling once above the village in silent formation. Not a threat, a vow. Protection would now flow both ways. The mother dragon remained a moment longer. She leaned down and gently touched her forehead to the ground before Ethan. Then she rose, carefully lifting her cub between her forelegs. With powerful wing beats, she ascended into the morning light. The villagers stood speechless long after the dragons vanished beyond the clouds. Ethan remained kneeling in the square, heart still racing. He had broken regulation, risked his career, invited scrutiny from councils both human and dragon. But what he had done next, choosing compassion when fear would have been easier, had left something far greater in its wake. Not awe, trust. And in a world where flame once divided species, that trust burned brighter than any fire. Trust, however, does not silence politics. Within 3 days, officials arrived from the capital. They did not ride horses. They came in reinforced steam carriages plated with tempered steel, escorted by uniformed enforcers armed with anti-dragon artillery. an unnecessary display, given the dragons had not been seen since their departure. The message was clear. Admiration from villagers meant nothing compared to violated protocol. Ethan stood outside his clinic when the lead carriage door opened. Director Halvorsen stepped out first. Tall, severe, immaculate gray coat with silver insignia marking authority over cross-species affairs. Her eyes scanned the scorched stone near the doorway, then the rooftops, calculating risk in silent columns of logic. "You used dragonfire extract," she said without greeting. "Yes." "Without council authorization." "Yes." "You understand that if the dosage had destabilized the hatchling's core, the backlash could have incinerated half this district?" Ethan folded his arms. "I calculated the margins." Her expression did not change. "You gambled with a dragon's life. I prevented a death." The enforcers shifted behind her, uncomfortable under the growing crowd of villagers who had gathered once more. Director Halvorsen stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Dragons are not livestock, Doctor. They are sovereign entities. You interfered in matters beyond your jurisdiction." Ethan met her gaze evenly. "A mother brought me her dying child. That's within my jurisdiction." Before she could respond, a shadow passed over the square. Then another. The temperature shifted not with threat, but with presence. Dragons descended again. Not dozens. Hundreds. They landed across rooftops, hillsides, and surrounding fields with controlled precision. No flames. No roaring. Just silent occupation. Director Halvorsen's composure tightened by a fraction. From the sky, the iron-gray patriarch descended last. He landed between the officials and Ethan. Enforcers raised their weapons instantly. The patriarch did not react. He lowered his head slightly toward Director Halvorsen. She did not bow, but she did lower her weapon. The air vibrated as he spoke. Not aloud, but through a pressure that settled behind the eyes. "You come to judge the healer." Director Halvorsen inhaled carefully. He violated treaty limitations. He preserved future. This is a human legal matter. It is no longer solely human. The statement hung like thunderclouds. Ethan stepped forward. "I'll accept review." "I knew the risk." The patriarch's gaze shifted briefly to him. "You stand alone." "I've stood alone before." A ripple of amusement moved through nearby dragons. Director Halvorsen assessed the formation surrounding them. Strategic positions. Defensive arcs. Calculated restraint. "This is coercion," she said quietly. The patriarch tilted his head. "No." He lifted one claw and gently placed it over his own chest. "Witness." From behind him, the mother dragon emerged. Her cub, now stronger, wing healing cleanly, walked at her side. Gasps spread through the officials. The cub approached Ethan again, confidence replacing weakness. He chirped brightly and pressed against Ethan's leg. The mother dragon stepped forward next. She lowered herself fully onto her forelegs, then bowed her head toward Director Halvorsen. Not submission, testimony. The patriarch's presence pressed gently against every mind in the square. He did not take. He did not demand. He answered need. Director Halvorsen's jaw tightened. Dragons do not involve themselves in human disciplinary procedure. "Correction," the patriarch replied calmly. "We did not." He gestured subtly toward Ethan. "He involved himself in ours." Silence. A political line had just shifted. Ethan felt it like tectonic movement beneath his feet. Director Halvorsen exhaled slowly. "If we condone this precedent, humans may attempt unauthorized intervention seeking favor." The patriarch's gaze hardened slightly. "Then judge motive." He leaned closer, not threateningly but intimately. He expected punishment. Ethan didn't deny it. "I did." He acted anyway. The cub suddenly lifted his small wings and gave a sharp, clear cry that echoed across stone and sky. Dozens of dragons answered. Not roaring, affirming. The sound vibrated through bone and blood. Director Halvorsen studied Ethan for a long moment. "You truly believed you might lose your license?" "Yes." "And you proceeded?" "Yes." "Why?" Ethan looked down at the cub, who blinked up at him with bright, living eyes. Because if law cannot make room for mercy, then law has already failed. The words settled heavier than any dragon's shadow. Director Halvorsen straightened. She turned slowly, taking in the sea of dragons surrounding the district. Not aggressive, not demanding tribute, simply present. Watching, guarding, waiting. She faced Ethan again. "You will undergo formal review," she said. "I expected that. But the review will include dragon testimony." A murmur rippled through both humans and dragons. The patriarch inclined his head once. Director Halvorsen signaled her enforcers to lower their weapons. "This incident," she continued carefully, "will be recorded not as violation, but as emergency discretion exercised under imminent fatal threat." Relief moved through the villagers like wind through grass. Ethan blinked. "You're not suspending me? You were reckless," she said evenly. "But not selfish." She stepped closer, lowering her voice again. "Do not make a habit of forcing my department into diplomatic negotiations with airborne apex predators." Despite himself, Ethan almost smiled. "I'll try not to." The patriarch exhaled slowly, tension easing from the gathered dragons. "Balance adjusts," he said. Director Halvorsen extended her hand. Not to the dragon. To Ethan. After a brief pause, he shook it. When she released him, she looked up at the iron-gray titan. "We will revise protocols. So will we." An understanding passed between species that had taken generations to build. The cub nudged Ethan one last time before retreating beside his mother. Dragons began lifting into the sky again, one by one. But this time, several remained perched along the mountain ridge overlooking the village. Not as a warning, as guardians. Director Halvorsen returned to her carriage. Before stepping inside, she glanced back. "You've complicated my career." Ethan folded his arms lightly. "Sorry." She almost smiled. "Do it again," she said quietly. "And next time warn me first." The carriage doors closed. Steam engines hissed. Officials departed. Above, dragons circled once in wide formation before dispersing into cloud cover. Ethan stood in the center of the square long after the last shadow vanished. He had expected exile, condemnation. Instead, something else had taken root. Shared responsibility. Not ownership, not control, but partnership. The mother dragon met his eyes one final time from the sky. No words were needed. Then she turned, guiding her healed cub toward the horizon. And for the first time in recorded history, when a dragon looked toward humanity, it was not with suspicion. It was with trust strengthened by choice. Seasons changed, but the story did not fade. It deepened. By the time winter settled across the mountain range, the clinic had transformed from a modest rural outpost into something unprecedented. Reinforced landing platforms now stretched beyond the village outskirts. Observation towers rose carefully between treelines. Not military structures, medical ones. Supply lines expanded. Human engineers collaborated with dragon architects, learning how airflow patterns from massive wings affected structural stability. Ethan never asked for any of it. Yet every expansion traced back to a single moment. A mother dragon refusing to let her child die. The first official joint council convened in early spring. Humans sat at a long stone table carved into the mountainside. Dragons formed a semicircle beyond it, their immense bodies arranged with deliberate symmetry. Between them lay no barrier, only space. Director Halvorsen presided over the human delegation. The iron-gray patriarch led the dragons. Ethan stood slightly behind the formal representatives, uncomfortable in ceremonial attire but present at their insistence. The topic was not gratitude. It was future structure. "We propose," Halvorsen began, voice steady against the mountain wind, "the establishment of integrated emergency protocols, shared communication channels, cross-training between healers." A murmur of deep-toned resonance moved through the dragons. The patriarch's gaze shifted to Ethan briefly before returning to Halvorsen. "You request access to vulnerable." "Mutual access," she corrected carefully. "Under defined circumstances." A younger dragon spoke next, scales bronze and eyes sharp with skepticism. Humans fear what they cannot control. Ethan stepped forward before he could stop himself. And dragons withdraw when they believe they aren't understood. Halvorsen shot him a warning glance but did not silence him. The bronze dragon studied Ethan. You presume understanding. No, Ethan replied evenly. I presume responsibility. Silence fell again. The mother dragon emerged from the far side of the gathering, her cub, no longer frail, walking confidently beside her. His wing had healed cleanly. Strength had returned to his posture. He approached the center of the clearing without hesitation. Neither delegation had expected that. The cub stopped between human and dragon representatives. Then he sat, exactly where Ethan had first treated him months ago, a quiet echo of that earlier choice. The patriarch observed carefully. He chooses middle ground. Halvorsen allowed herself the faintest smile. Children often see solutions adults complicate. The bronze dragon lowered his head toward the cub. And if future healers fail? Ethan answered before fear could form. Then judge us, as you would judge your own. The statement carried weight. Shared accountability, not immunity. The patriarch extended one massive wing slightly outward, casting partial shade over the table. Then agreement requires reciprocity. Halvorsen nodded. It does. Terms were negotiated for hours, not with hostility, but with precision. Protocol for venom extraction. Guidelines for handling dragonfire exposure. Airspace coordination to prevent accidental conflict. Ethical standards governing intervention in hatchling development. At last, as the sun began dipping toward the horizon, the final clause remained. Trust could not be written into parchment, could not be enforced by law. The patriarch stepped forward, closing the physical gap entirely. He lowered his head toward Ethan once more, but this time he spoke aloud in a voice that rolled like distant thunder. Human healer, your action altered more than fate of one hatchling. It altered trajectory of perception. Every dragon in attendance bowed their heads slightly. Not submission, recognition. Ethan felt the weight of it and nearly staggered beneath it. I only did what anyone should, he said quietly. The patriarch's eyes glowed faintly. History proves otherwise. He turned to the gathered dragons. Let record show. When one of ours cried, a human answered. The words rippled outward through dragons, through humans, through the watching villagers beyond the ridge. Halvorsen stepped beside Ethan. The council accepts joint stewardship, she declared formally. One by one, dragons struck the earth gently with their foreclaws, a resonant sound that echoed across the valley. Agreement. The cub suddenly leaped forward and wrapped both small forelegs around Ethan's waist in an awkward embrace. Laughter, human and draconic alike, broke the solemn atmosphere. The mother dragon approached and lowered her massive head beside Ethan. Instead of bowing this time, she pressed her forehead gently against his shoulder. Equal height would have made the gesture impossible, so she made herself smaller. The symbolism did not go unnoticed. Above them, dragons launched into the air, not as a show of dominance, but celebration. Spirals of coordinated flight painted shifting shadows across stone and snow. Halvorsen glanced sideways at Ethan. You realize, she said quietly, that your clinic is about to become the busiest medical facility on the continent. Ethan exhaled. I was hoping for a quiet life. She almost laughed. You chose the wrong species to help for that. As twilight settled, torches were lit along the mountainside. Dragons perched along high cliffs watching the village below. Not as overlords, not as detached guardians, but as invested allies. The cub tugged at Ethan's sleeve one last time before bounding back toward his mother. He paused halfway, turned, and released a clear, bright cry into the evening sky. This time it was not pain. It was promise. Dragons answered from every direction. Ethan stood there long after the council dispersed, staring at the horizon where stars began piercing through fading light. Months ago, a grieving mother had approached him with desperation. He had not sought glory. He had not expected alliance. He had simply refused to let fear dictate action. Now, children in the village would grow up seeing dragons not as distant legends or looming threats, but as neighbors. And dragons would remember that when one of their smallest needed help, a human did not hesitate. Flame had once divided their histories, but compassion had rewritten the future. And in that shared warmth, neither species stood alone again.